Welcome to the Intentional Way, where literally every moment is a step towards purposeful living. I'm Brian Hatch, here to explore the power of intention with you. Learn from our guests who embody intentionality. I'm glad you're here with me. Let's get started. We're excited today to have a special guest with us, David Gilliland. If you look at his rap sheet, if you look at his bio on LinkedIn, if you get to know this guy, he has a laundry list of things that he's accomplished in his life, from consulting some of the biggest companies I've ever heard of to really making a difference with entrepreneur teams and businesses that are growing. Before we get into all of the topics and the discussion here, David, what should people know about you that they couldn't find on just your profiles and your bios that are out there on the internet?
I'm really good at cooking. Let me just say that the way it is, right?
All right.
I mean, not many people are really good at it. As far as a untrained person, I eat well, and I think it shows. And so
what's a favorite dish? If you're a good cook, like what's one of the tops? I know that as a cook, there's not just one, but what's one of the most frequent or top meals you like to prepare?
now this is the difference. It's not because they're ultra fancy. It's because they taste really good, but they're simple.
Yeah.
So I do simple and really good. So I make a very good street taco, but I also make a really good lentil taco. And people are like, lentil taco, that sounds awful. No, really, it's good. I make incredible breakfasts. So you want like a whole wheat pancake that comes out tasting exceptional? Yeah, I got one for you. Or like a sourdough waffle that's got onions and bell pepper and spinach inside, and you top it with avocado and cilantro and tomatoes.
Wow.
That's not a waffle people typically have. And I've got cheese in the middle of it inside. And so it's exceptionally tasty, but it's easy to make. And so I do easy, but extremely good.
That is exciting to hear. One of these times I'm going to have to be close enough to you during a breakfast hour to participate in some of these. But the lentil taco, I'm in. I'm down for the lentil taco. I want to try that.
Yeah, hang out with me and I can fatten you up a little bit there, Brian.
Is that what people say when they're around you eating? Is that what you're
That's
doing
right.
to people?
I just fatten them up.
It sounds like you're not, though. It sounds like those are thoroughly healthy comparatively to what you could get just, on a
Yeah,
typical
but the
day.
taste makes you have such a high quantity. You can eat
Okay.
healthy, but if it's high quantity, trust me, you add it on.
So you will eat it, but eat too much of it. So it's healthy, but too much of a good thing. Okay.
That's exactly right.
Got it. Thank you for sharing a little more about your cooking experience. I think that's really cool. I want to know a little bit more about what is making a difference in your life right now, David. Like what's happening? What's in any area of your life? What is making a big difference for you?
I think one area that's making the biggest difference is becoming more aware of strengths that I have that serve me very well in certain areas and how they may impede some of the objectives and hopes, relationships that I want in other areas of life. And so lately it's been looking at those and saying, hey, these may be things I've identified myself with, but could be getting in the way of others flourishing because I'm leading out with my strength instead of letting theirs bubble up or listening better or whatever it may be. That's been a lot of fun in the last few months. Sorry, this is probably isn't where you wanted to go in life, but
What would it
that's
be?
my latest one. My latest one is, hey, I want not just to be the best I can be. I want to help others around me flourish. And if what I'm doing is holding them back, causing them doubt or fear or whatever else, because I'm being the entrepreneur minded, seeing a problem and I'm going after it, I've got an idea and I say it in a way as though it's final instead of inviting, or that I'm speaking my mind quickly instead of just listening and letting others speak and helping them flourish. I'm transitioning basically from I think I'm getting ready, instead of being the dad running stuff or husband in and going, to say, wait a second, let's be a wiser grandpa that's helping to flourish. I don't have any grandkids yet, but can't
Okay.
be too many years in the future. I've got a few adult kids now.
Okay. So I think it's fascinating what you said was you're becoming more aware of your strengths. And then you put into a context of almost, because you know your strengths, holding them back to let other people flourish. So tell me how that's synonymous, because typically when I hear someone talk about being aware of their strengths, moving into those. And it sounds like you're aware of them so that you can bring them into the play when you need to.
Yeah. So, for example, I move forward confidently in the things I do. Right. And that's a great win when I'm serving in a role of an individual contributor or that I need to make a final decision on something. But in most areas of life where I'm not solo doing, and in fact, I'm interacting with others, though that strength has served me very well in my life, it doesn't necessarily serve others because it gets in the way of their ability to confidently move forward. I can run over the top of it
Okay.
unintentionally, but I've watched it in other people and leaders around me, and I'm hyper aware of it now because I'm seeing it so much in myself. But watch the dynamics in a team when the leader is saying, instead of when they're stepping back and letting others speak or explore, even if their ideas that they're sharing are not the best ideas, the fact that they're sharing, the fact that they're risking, the fact that they're trying, that's growth that's needed. Can I let them try that a little bit? That's how I learned, and allow them to flourish a little, allow them to make an error and, or to guide them with just questions. Maybe not even guide them, maybe just explore because maybe I haven't seen some things. And so the world always says things. Everyone out there is always saying, hey, go use your strengths, bring your value to the world, do this and that. Many of us have a role to make sure that others get to do that. And I think other people who have a strength and a superpower in engaging with other people and listening to them and helping them flourish get run over by people like me. And so the very strength I want to build is suppressed because of my actions. And so that's what I mean. That's an example. There's others, but that's
Yeah.
one it's hyper aware of and seeing. And as I'm acting wiser in that space intentionally, as I work with people, I'm finding the relationships improving. I'm learning things that like, oh, that is a really good. I wouldn't have thought of that. I thought just people are geniuses all around you. But if I put a tamp on them because I'm moving forward confidently or sharing a great idea or whatever else, instead of first hearing and listening and appreciating, I miss it. So
How did you come to conclude this? Like, how did you get to this point where you're consciously aware of allowing other people to bring up their ideas and letting them flourish, whether that's your family or business or relationships otherwise? How did you come to conclude that as opposed to just continually living in that confident, moving through life and getting things done? And I'm going to call it, you didn't say the word bulldozing, but maybe that's a little bit of what you have
what
experienced and
what they experienced with me.
uh, of you. Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. Especially with those who are more sensitive to relationship dynamics around, right? Who are watching and trying to give me space. I was always taking the space while they were giving it instead of giving it back, right?
Mm.
So awareness came because I was feeling dissonance or a gap between the relationship that I felt I wanted with these people around me and what was actually happening. And it was plural, right? I was like, this person and this one, something. And I realized there was one common denominator, and that was me. And so now I'm not, I can't claim, and it's not right to be so egocentrical to claim it's all and everything is always me. But there's certainly a sliver in there of, in fact, there's a full wedge of truth right in the middle of like that. There's a lot of truth in that. And it's also an area that I can act in. And so I saw it and I'm like, oh, well, that stinks. I bet it's been difficult for these people. They've been so kind and generous all this time around me in these ways. And so, yeah, working through it. And I've seen wonderful things come from it.
Tell me a little bit about some of those wonderful things. And real quick, maybe even mention how long have you been focusing on this specifically, like allowing other people to flourish in those conversations, in those situations. So how long have you been thinking about that? And then secondarily, what are some of those? You've alluded to some, but maybe some specific examples of where you've seen that make a difference.
For years and years, I have cared about and tried to do that for people and thought I was. But what I didn't realize was, even though I would say, and I would give time and space, like, oh no, I really want to hear what you're saying, this and that. It was actually like, it's like the tone of my voice and the positioning of my body that was sending another message that, let's say, with a team member talking about something that's budget related. And in the last few months, we've had a rough little bumpiness where, like, hey, all of these investments didn't pay off the way I would have liked. Let's get this changed. And, well, as an entrepreneur, I'll hyper focus in. Like, well, I know exactly what I spend on, and I spend on nothing else. Right. I hyper focus, and I don't care about anything else while I'm hyper focused, moving forward confidently. This is our fix it way. Well, it was sending a message of not trusting others in expenditures and in what they're doing. And people who have budget are all of a sudden coming to me and asking like $28 decisions. And I was, what is happening here? Like, you can make these choices. And I'm seeing in their eyes, no, they've been feeling something else from me, though. In fact, what they were feeling wasn't just budget worries or concerns. They started to feel mistrusted. And so it started to bleed into everything else. And I saw that in team. I saw that in my family. I saw that around. I was like, oh, I'm hyper-focused. I'm moving forward. And they're feeling that has no value. That has no value. We have no reason to invest in that. But really, it was sending a message of, you have poor values. You are lesser. I've got a right answer, and not making space. And all my words may have sounded fine. Maybe the words were terrible too, but I know the tone wasn't one of trust. And so doing a preamble when they ask a question and say things like, oh, instead of me giving my opinion when they ask a question, just say, oh, wow, that's a good question. What is it you think that we ought to do? And then saying, because my voice may have sounded like, well, what do you think we ought to do? And there's this judgment in the middle of that of like, do you have good thoughts? And instead, well, what do you think we ought to do? I'm confident whatever you decide will work. I trust your decisions. So having to say it out loud instead of just the other words, I actually started to make a big difference.
That's awesome.
Being overt about my intentions and feelings. And at times I was actually overriding how I was really first feeling inside, right? I am a person and I do have my little knee-jerk reactions. And I'm like, no, David, you value this and you will say this and you will mean it while you tell them, until I start to really believe it. Yeah, I had to do that too.
Good. And what are some of the outcomes? Do you have any specifics you could mention that you're seeing as you're being aware in these situations, as you've practiced for, sounds like a long time now?
Well, my intentional practice of changing the voice and position and being overt about my intentions behind it have only been the last few months.
Okay. So
before I was doing all the things that, saying some things, but not sharing my intention behind it too, and not being careful about the tone differences and stuff. We'll see. We hope they play well. But so far, I'm seeing people around me more freed up to act and not, and sharing more where they're at, where their concerns are and worries, and not feeling as much judgment in the middle of it. So
wow,
really good so far.
What powerful statements. And I think, David, to hear you, like, when people become aware and when you've become aware that what you're creating isn't always what you intend to create, like you realize that you're a factor. There's the other side, there's the person listening, all the stuff that they're doing and thinking and going through in their own life. But it sounds like as you've become aware of that, I don't think that's the majority of people, that they're aware that even when you're moving confidently through, like you were saying and doing things that you're like, this is going to be budget conscious. I'm going to focus on this thing. I'm going to get this thing done. But to be aware that even in that path, you are still affecting people in maybe you'd call it negative way or in
Yeah,
an
they're negative
unuseful
ways.
way. And I think that's the rarity. I think, or at least the minority at minimum, of a person that's aware that they are a factor, as opposed to it's, gosh, why does this guy doesn't he trust me? Why doesn't he trust me over here? Why does he have to come to me for asking these questions? Why doesn't he feel like I trust him? I think are common questions maybe in those same scenarios, but
Yeah.
you've
Hey,
cut above.
I think this is too broad of a brush and it doesn't apply to everybody, and it could be culturally derived. But I found that the women in my life are more naturally or have built the muscles to be more aware of how their behaviors affect others
Hmm.
and are thinking of the overall group and what's going on. And most of the men and things, we often get more task focused, and which is funny because I think the real power is how you understand what you do interacts with everybody else and how together you can move forward. I think there's an exponential return that can come out of that instead of I do A and I get B, which is this task focused nature. And so
Mhm.
most of that has been aimed towards improving those relationships, right? The women I work with, the women in my life, my wife, my kids, I have all girls, so I'm surrounded by those, but it has positive impact. Also, it's rather disarming for the
Mhm.
men and the in business. I, my my coaching to hold back more and to see and give them more space to explore where they feel like they freely can and not like they're trying to find the right answer,
Yeah.
I think is improving also. So it's just one of those. I think a lot of us boys from the playground never learned those kind of smart skills because we were just trying to kick it further.
We're just trying to kick it further, run faster, whatever the case is, right?
That's right.
Well, that's fascinating. And today we're here talking about intention. I think we've done a good job thus far already learning a little more about how your strengths are making a difference and how you're even holding those back a little bit so that you can expand and learn and become more aware. Tell me, David, where's another area of your life that you feel very intentional?
In our family, in my work, I don't know. There's a lot of areas. It's easier for me to say, here's the areas of life I'm not intentional. But like
Common.
so in family, my wife and I are intentional to work together to say, what do we care most about? Do we have a guiding principle or a purpose? What matters most to us? And then what are our values and the things that we want to put into our children and or expose them to so they can decide as they grow, but they can be exposed to good things and become the best they can. We're intentional about that. And then how we order our life to get there. So we have a we want to, this is on a religious context. So I'll go a high level. So religious
Sure.
context, we believe that we should gather all people in the world back to God. And so however people define God out there, for me, I believe we're all his children and everybody, he wants everybody back. There's not an us versus them. And what does back mean? Let's go a very practical way. Back is back acting like a family that all love each other.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. And so
That's a good way to
that
put it.
can look like in one religion, all returned back and believing and trusting and following good principles to live a good life. I could look in another progression until they all return to a higher state. So there can be all sorts of things, but just think all back and all included. So we have some values: love, driving principle, inclusion, big deal. Right? We also have that family matters more than anything else. And so it looks like that in our calendar. Like our kids don't have very many extracurricular things. I got 8 kids. And for us to do and serve the way we want to as a family to share love with others, that requires them not being in 1,000 places. We are not the soccer mom and dad. That probably works for some families. That's their
Oh,
strategy. Our strategy is no, right? We say no to pretty much all that stuff. during the school hours, if we choose to send them to school, then they can be involved in school. But sometimes we take them out for a semester, for a year, and we do other things together that we feel are important to give them exposure in life. So we've built the business in a way that I've been able to take time and go travel with the family, meaning live in other countries for extended periods of time, months, 2 months, 5 months, whatever, and go live amongst the poor who are rich in love, in kindness, and generosity, in the very values we want to teach our kids. They are rich in. And so we spend time around them to learn from them. We learn how to love from them and with them. And so we do that. That can be painful for a kid to give up their senior year in high school to go live somewhere else and miss the glory days, whatever people call that false culture of high school. That's an example, but we want our children to learn and grow and question and wonder. And we want them to do it with us instead of without us as much. We set up a time every week that we do a question answer. The younger ones are in bed, 12-year-old and up, they get to stay up Sunday night and ask any question they want. And if they don't ask enough questions, we bring up the ones that make them uncomfortable. And we say, well, let's ask this question then, right? We're going to talk about all sorts of things, funny things, pointless things, deep things, uncomfortable things, but we want them to ask questions, and then we'll share what we know. And they're like, oh no, here's that answer again. Mom and dad don't know. Okay. That's where we're at. We don't know. We're discovering that with you, and that it's okay to still not know the answers to something.
Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this episode, please subscribe, follow, and download our episode. Your support allows us to bring more intentional guests just like this, and it means the world to us. Now, let's get back to the episode. David, that like what you've just described sounds picturesque. Like it sounds like beautiful. I can't speak for the audience listening, but to have a family that's connected in that way, the way that you described it, sounds like a lot of work. Did you and your wife naturally just want to build that together? Tell me a little about that process. Like, how did you get clear on all of those things of keeping your kids out of a lot of extracurriculars and having the Q&A nights and spending time together and even pulling kids out of school to do the things that would serve your family in the way that you've decided? How did you come to that? That sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, there's a lot of conversations. So we use the phrase in our family, intentionality. That's
Really
a big deal. And we talk about it all the time, to be intentional about our parenting. And it doesn't have to look like someone else's. To be intentional about our marriage doesn't have to look like someone else's, but we try to base it on the best research and the best insights we gain spiritually and the practices that we've seen out there. We borrowed some so when we first got married, we both knew we wanted a family, and we wanted a pretty large family. Okay. She wanted more kids than I did, which was really big surprise. And neither one of us got to the number we wanted. So
wow.
Far. And
8.
so
you guys
we've
amazing.
Only got 8. And
8 girls. That's incredible. Like amazing.
Yeah, it's a fun little crew. We didn't plan out a perfect life, but because it changes, we don't always know what they want and where they're at. And some things that they want are dumb. I shouldn't say dumb. Some things that they want may not see the longer term effects. And so helping them to work through and see may take some time. But we've talked since before we had kids about what we want to do with our family. My wife's study is marriage, family, human development on the education side. Okay. But mine is organizational behavior, leadership, strategy, team dynamics. And so we care about this stuff. We think about this stuff, and we talk a lot. So every day on a touch-in basis, she and I have a rhythm built. Every day we are going to talk right after work. I'm going to get home. The kids are finally given time that they're allowed to go read. This is their only reading. They're allowed to go read, right? And so they go and they read and they love to get reading, and we go on a walk and we talk and we touch bases. Great. We try every week to have a longer conversation about what's going on in the following week and getting aligned and what we're trying to think about. And then we get the kids and they're part of a discussion together. what we're doing for the next week after she and I are more aligned. And then we have some open areas that they can influence. And we try to, and if we don't plan it in, it ends up happening anyway, because things can blow up, which is what's the long-term ones. And that may take 4 to 8 hours of time talking about what is the big picture for the rest of this year? What are we trying to create? What are the attributes that some of our kids need to build and work on? What are some skills that would be important to them? And we just set up, we talk a lot and we make plans. And then on occasion we list out and say, hey, what's our 5-year big bucket items that we think would be family solidifying, life changing, and build the relationships we couldn't do any other way. And then we'll plan some of those things out, put them into the calendar or put them into the wish cloud, and then start adding them into the calendar as we kind of go forward. So just a lot of talking. And, in any relationship, you're working through all sorts of stuff. Those are our dailies and our weeklies, but thinking the long-term matters too, and to readjust and say, are we still headed the way we want to? Should we shift this and how? So a lot of conversation, a lot of planning together.
So if I can codify a little bit of what I've heard you say is that there's the day-to-day, there's pieces that are daily check-ins, there's a little bit more of the weekly or bigger, but it's also tied to the long-term, whether it's the year we're in or even longer term than that. Sounds like a lot of planning. It sounds like a lot of thought. And again, like you said, like the word intentional or intentionality is what you guys talk about. That's fascinating and such a good example for so many people listening, no matter if you have kids or married or anything like that, that if you want to create something, it requires effort and energy. One of the things I listened to recently, someone said, they said, hey, what's 4 plus 5? Okay, you can do that real quick. And then they said, what's 72 times 43?
Takes a little more, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you can put it out on paper and if you know how to do that, you can write it out and get the answer as opposed to using a calculator. And the person I was listening to was talking about how if we think that we can get it all done just within our head on the things we want to be intentional about, he wasn't talking about intention, but the way I took it is if we want to be good about the things you've just described, what the long-term goal is, what this year we want to accomplish, what each of our children need to work on, and how can we incorporate that into the activities and the work that we're doing with our family. What incredible power that is to have the discussions, write it out, calendar it out. I don't know that you said those things, but it's a
But we
way
do
to
those
make
things.
traction.
That's
Yeah.
what we do. Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't, if it's just all lives in your head, then it's a lot of talk and a lot less action, possibly. Possibly.
Yeah. It can be just dreams, but start there. Have the conversations. Like start having the conversation.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times as we get older, people stop dreaming
Mm.
and stop imagining a different future. And they start just feeling like they have to just live in the current. And it could be caused because of fears. Maybe finances are really tough and they're struggling to get bread on the table. Maybe some relationships or health issues were very different than they had imagined, and they can start to feel stuck in a spot. And so I completely understand it. And yet with people, wherever you're at, to continue to dream and say, what do we hope for? And what would it look like today? What at that point in the future to be that, to do that? What do those kinds of people do? What's it look like? What's it feel like? And today, what could I do? Because I need to live into that dream and just start to be it. And so that's that. What's it look like today? What would have to be done this week? What has to be finished by the end of the month if we're going to pull that off? Or how do I need to make room for people around me to flourish and grow? Because I can change the way I've been, my identity, my strengths, right? And start instead to allow others and build a new strength, right? Something, a muscle that was weaker, start building that one. Be that other kind of person in a way that matches the goals I really have.
Yeah. What a great point you've brought up is as we have to think about what we're becoming. And if we're not currently living intentionally or we're not accomplishing or creating the vision or dreaming, as you said, then it can start with thinking about what you want to become and become it now. Old adage of, if you get more successful, if you make whatever you want to accomplish happen, you're just more of what you've always been. Now you have to change yourself, but if you're generous now, you'll be generous then. If you're a miser now, you'll be a miser then, unless you have intent to change that. And so it's the becoming, though. Like, we have to become, it's the identity. Like, I am this kind of a person. I do these kind of things. I think these kind of thoughts. I operate in the world like this, as opposed to letting ourselves just run the way we run. There's a incredible amount of intention that just comes between your ears on that kind of a subject.
Yeah. And I mean, everyone's got the same amount of like time and probably the same amount of thoughts going through. No, it's not true. I have a tenth of the thoughts go through my head that my wife does. But maybe
Yeah.
we have the capacity. I don't know, but we've got plenty of excess capacity of thinking. What we do we spend that excess capacity unwinding, recreating? I'm not saying these are bad things, but sometimes in the US, we take it to an excess, binging on something. Or do we let those pieces have their place if they're needed and instead start to build and think and plan a little bit, or just approach day-to-day life differently on purpose, right?
Yeah.
Or intentionally.
I find, like, in today's society, that there's an incredible amount of distraction, a credible amount of opportunities to do whatever you want to do. But you're right, we all have the same amount of time, and everything in the world, at least the way that I see it, is fighting for that time. It used to be that it was fighting for, like, discretionary income, or, hey, what other income do you have that you'd be willing to spend over here at my business? But I feel like now it's, how much can I just pull the time that you have and serve my business or my thought or my over here? And I'm saying, like, I'm not saying everything's evil or everybody's doing bad things. It's just a matter of, you can only allot your time so many ways before the day is over. That's all. It's all trade-offs. If I do this, like we're talking right now, I can't also be having brunch with my wife. I can't do those things at the same time. So what we pick and choose to do is a little bit more of how we become, right? Like, it's, what are we doing with that extra time? And it's not, I don't think you said to have a little time off or watch a show here or there is bad, but is it preventing you to become who you want to become or accomplish what you want to accomplish?
Yeah. Yeah. Is it getting in the way? And a lot of times it is. They're just trying to own your eyes and have free real estate, unpaid rent in your mind, right? That's what they
Yeah.
want. And the reality is it's your space. But that's also an intentional thing. We don't recognize how much that influences and changes our attitudes and behaviors. Like if screen's on, I'm into it.
Hmm.
I am Mr. Distracted. Get that screen on, I'm in it. I could lose away and feel wonderfully unhealthy just watching TV. And that seems so lame. And it almost doesn't even matter what's on. I could just get sucked in, right?
Hmm.
Knowing that we pretty early on in marriage, like before we had even our second kid, we're just like, we just decided I have a TV, right? And
Really?
so we don't have a TV. We haven't had a TV for all the raising of my children, and they don't have smartphones. They don't have social media accounts. Now they read incredibly well. They have no words I've never heard, and they're very bright children. And they're creative and they engage with each other, but it takes so much energy to parent when you can't just plug them in.
Mm.
And it's wonderful, wonderful use of that energy because it's also really fulfilling. You have to engage more. And remember, they're not being sent off to a ton of extracurricular stuff. So they're with us,
Yeah.
right? We're cooking together. We're cleaning together. We're shopping together. We're solving problems together. They're working on homework. As they get into high school, we let them do some homework. When they're at grade school, we don't because we think it's a waste of time. But they're allowed to choose when they're in high school. And so they're doing homework, but we're doing it with them. Or we're running about doing other things, helping someone out there, and we're around each other. And so there's a lot more conversation. There's a lot more things because we didn't want to give free rent in our minds
Hmm.
to what everyone else is intentionally trying to do for them. But if it's something where we're loving and helping and serving someone, now it serves the purpose, right? That purpose drives our decisions every week when we're looking at our calendars. That purpose is the number one thing that's measuring, is this the right thing for us?
What an incredible experience. I believe if I turn the coin on the other side, that maybe the society that we live here in the United States would say that's oppressive.
Yeah.
I want to make sure you hear me. I'm not saying
Thank you.
that, but I could hear society saying you're oppressive to your children. And I'm interested to know I know you have 8 daughters, and I'm a parent well enough to know that each of them are going to have a different personality, different strengths, different weaknesses. But can you tell me from their perspective, how do they experience the intention you and your wife have around their lives? How would they spit it back to me if they were here and not you? How would they tell me? And I know you gotta have to pick 1 or 2 of them to think about, but
Yeah. Well, I like to tell them it's an informed monarchy. This is not a democracy.
there you go.
Oppressive, that doesn't sound too bad, except that what they hate is how often they have to make decisions.
Hmm.
And we let them know, but we don't let them off on the easy way, because general society says decisions, do what you want. And they mean do what you want today and now for this moment.
Hmm.
And our kids hate it, and sometimes, because we're like, okay, you've got this decision to make. Let's talk about the long-term effects of the decisions we make. Like, no, I want to think, just tell me no, or whatever. And we're like,
Oh,
you have to think through this, but we want to see that you were intentional about the decision you were making and that you were tying it. So maybe they want to last minute get a call. Yeah, we're doing this. We want to go over to friends and do this and play. Like, all right, that sounds lovely. You were with friends. You were just at a choir event. That's one of the few things that kids do on an extracurricular, because there's a class schedule they can do it during school. But on occasion, they've got to go perform. So maybe they just finish something up and they've got to go, and they want to go and do something with friends, which is great. But may have had another commitment, something else that was going on with other people. These friends are the same friends they just spent time with, but there were others in their circles that could use some love, some care, some nurturing of those friendships. And if one friend group always gets the attention and others don't get included in, then we're not really learning well how to love people who are different. We're hanging with the most comfortable crowd all the time. Or we're not putting ourselves out there for the good of others. We're just having fun. And you know what? That may be the right answer. It may be having fun that night was the right answer. I've been stressed. I've been strung out. I need to do. Well, they got to make those decisions. But they care a lot on whether or not if they feel like we approve of the decision or not.
Hmm.
I'm not going to release them from that. I may have a different opinion, but we care that it's a conscious decision, what they're doing, that they're thinking through it and not just responding to stimuli that's put out there, right? Don't just respond, think about it and make a conscious choice. And if this is the time to go hang out with those friends, go and do that with all your heart now. And if this is a time to do these others, do that. And if it's a friend time, when are you going to do these others, build these other friendships? Those are decisions to make. Or maybe it's you've been rather busy and you haven't really been carrying a weight here at home the way you could have or should have. It's time to step up. You've got to invest in your time here at home. Do some cleaning, spend some time with sisters, right? Whatever that is. There's so many things to think about. We don't want them to have analysis paralysis, but how would they respond? They would say, we have an amazing and kind of magical life in a lot of ways. And it can be hard being intentional. That's just not fun. Come on, let me just live a kid's life. Like, yeah, well, you are, but you're just trying to be more intentional as a kid.
Do they say those things? They say, come on, just let me, it sounds like, come on, just tell me no.
Yeah, those things have come. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Um,
that's incredible.
so yeah, is it oppressive to some? Probably. There are trade-offs. I took my first we took a trip and the family went and lived in the rainforest in this small community on the Amazon for about 5 months.
Which country?
Brazil.
Okay.
So we were there. Kids didn't speak Portuguese. That's tough. No one there spoke English. It's kind of tough. And the senior was pulled from that year, her senior year. And she was going to be the president of this, the leader of that. Like she was a very involved student
Yeah.
in different things. And that was hard. It was really hard. But she got a choice. Like, you can stay and we'll set it up and you can stay with your aunt or whatever else. And you cannot come and have this experience with us. We would love for you to come. And they're, of course, torn up. I could never miss that, but the cost is so high. Yeah, it's tough. And that's hard. That's hard to put that on a kid. But it's really good too, right?
Mhm.
They have to wrestle with that. And it took a while for her to really feel good about that decision. Sometimes you had to revisit it. But she got there and she loves it. She would never change it. Now she's fluent in Portuguese now, has many friends in Brazil, and
Wow.
ended up serving a mission for our church there in Brazil. Just, it was a huge, huge advantage for her. And it was really hard at the time. But that's what being intentional in work, we would say, having a strategy. We're saying we want to be this. How are we going to go about doing it? Well, that means what are the 100 or 1,000 ways we're not going to go about doing it? Strategy informs what you say no to. Doesn't make it easier. It just makes it clear. And so, I don't know. We're probably oppressive. I don't think so. I don't think they'd say that. we have a lot of adventures in our life. It's very full. But they don't feel like, why can't I just live like normal, like everybody else? Like, because we're not like everybody else. And they like that unless they don't that day. But most of the time they do, and they just love it. It has been very rich, very fun, and they're each other's best friends. So,
Yeah. You said you have some adult children now. What are their ages roughly?
just barely adult. So 18, 20, 21.
Okay. It's a fun time of life. I'm interested to know how they're operating through life differently than their peers at those ages,
Oh,
given the intentionality you guys have put into their lives.
uh, quite a bit different but each of them's in their own way, right? So they're unique in their things. Some things like, I don't care about that. And other things they fully embrace and they stick out as very weird, odd amongst their peers in it and are a bit of a magnet for others, right? That want to come and say, oh, you're different. Your life is different and they want to be around them.
What a fascinating thing you shared with us, David, today between what you do in work and life. It sounds like one of the probably many areas, but one of the areas you've really mastered the way I'm experiencing it is that parenting and creating something that is different on purpose with a intentional focus on the vision you have, as opposed to it. I feel like there's so many times in life, David, that we just live the default path. Like it's whatever is most easy. And I'm not saying everything has to be easy, but it's just go with the flow of all the other traffic around our neighborhood, our communities, our state, world, country, whatever. Just go down that path. And that's minimum. It's not hard to go down that path. I'm not saying there aren't challenges that are inherent of going down the default path, but when you can get outside of that and decide, even if you do things that might be considered default or like everybody else is just
Yeah.
doing this,
You
but if you did it
decided it.
on purpose,
Yeah.
totally fine. As opposed to just kind of like, well, this is what we do.
Yeah. I,
Yeah.
I think it's a good exercise in using choice. It's a good muscle to build.
Yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't, like, lives don't have to look like each other. But I do think we need to know what we want and work together with others to get that. It's not a I serve me, because we don't actually exist in that world that way. That's kind of the way a lot of the community's been going.
Mm,
You do you, right?
yeah.
And yet that could be really powerful if the you is like a you all of you pick the thing that matters most to you and find something that's higher than any one individual. Together, go after that. I think we create a pretty great world like that.
But we're fractioning, like we're breaking off into you do you is you
Serve
do
what you
anything
want
that has
right now.
anything to do with, yeah, serve yourself and no one else.
And that there are no higher principles or purposes beyond your desires right now.
Mm.
And that's problematic, because all of us can admit if we did exactly what our desires were right now throughout our lives, we'd be in some pretty tough spots.
Yeah.
It's just like, no, desires, those are fleeting feelings. Pick something you care about and do hard things and be uncomfortable. And you'll find growth and great relationships and becoming. So
I had a conversation recently with my wife around the fact that sacrifice is required. And the more you have intention or more you have a vision that you're going after and trying to become that thing, whether that's you or accomplish some goal, sacrifice is required all the more. And I think in today's society, we want to believe that there's no need to sacrifice, that I get to do all that I want to do and never have to sacrifice what I want to do in order to get what I want. And I don't know if there's anything further from the truth, in my opinion, that if you do you, unless it's tied to some vision you want to create, you're going to have to sacrifice some part of you, some part of the current you for the future you, or the future, whoever it is you want to serve.
yeah, otherwise you are sacrificing the future dreams, desires for the current now and want. So you're right. There's always a sacrifice. We just don't always see it or feel it.
David, beautiful conversation. Is there anything else you'd share as we close up our conversation here today? What else? This has been fascinating for me to hear the intricacies of your life. Thank you for sharing. But what else would you leave us with today?
Have fun the whole time you do it. There's still spontaneity and fun and enjoyment, and just like, there's no reason to get too serious about your intentionality. Do it. Be clear about that. And then just, you get to still bring the rest of who you are in the middle of all of this. So the joy doesn't go away being intentional. It's actually to amplify it.
I could see some people listening that are like the spontaneous, like they're the just fly by the seat of their pants. There are personalities like that, and that's fine. They would say, "Oh, I got to plan everything, and I got to have all this vision and structure." And what I heard you just say is bust that bubble of no, go have fun in it and just know what you're after, as
Yeah.
opposed to flying around aimlessly.
Yeah. The intentionality doesn't need to mean every hour scheduled out perfectly, but it does mean that you will be the person you want to be through the spontaneity that you're in. So I am the spontaneity person. That's me. I don't like planning out all the details. And I really love planning out the things I care most about. And then spontaneity is all there. Things are going to go awry in the plans. Great. Spontaneity pops right into those and helps to roll with it really fast or whatever. So anyway, you don't have to give up your joy and your fun and whatever else in the middle of it. It can all be there.
Yeah. Well, David, thank you very much for being with us here today. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I hope to have you back soon.
Good talking with you.
Thank you for joining us on The Intentional Way. I'm Brian Hatch, and it's been a true privilege to share this time with you. If today's episode has inspired you in any way, shape, or form, please subscribe, follow, and download our episodes. Your support not only helps us grow, it also enables us to bring more insightful conversations and exceptional guests right to you. Living intentionally begins with a single step, yours. So let's make the most of it. Until next time, seek intention by being completely present.